12:05 in the afternoon here on 90.3 FM, helping seniors of Brevard, ready to get underway. Let's find out what our host and Executive Director of Helping Seniors of Brevard, Kerry Fink, has in store today. And one of our favorite people is the guest.
Oh, 100%. You said it. John Harper, thank you. And thank you for joining us at 90.3 FM WEJF for the Helping Seniors Lunch Hour. We gather every Wednesday around the radio, and thank you if you're listening online at WEJF.net. And for those, the growing number who catch us as a podcast later, you can find us every place you get a podcast: Apple, iTunes, Spotify, iHeartRadio, Amazon Podcast. We're there because we are serious as 100% local to Brevard County, Florida. Very serious about helping you get your aging plan together. Joe Steckler, who's our president and founder, he's the same guy that got the Brevard Alzheimer's Foundation rolling. They call them Joe's Clubs to this day, those super centers that are really, I would call them life givers for caregivers and the ones that they love and care for, because it's adult daycare and it lets people kind of move through all that. Joe was instrumental in getting all that started. And then when I met him, which is now must be 15 years ago, he was just getting ready to launch the Helping Seniors organization. And he said, Kerry, we found that people really, many families are challenged with cognitive issues, but all families are challenged with senior issues as we get older. And so having a plan to help us do that is the right way to help us do that. And he calls it an aging plan. We're going to get into a little bit of that conversation today because, as John Harper alluded to, one of our favorite people is in the studio. His name, and he's really like one of the best go-to experts on almost anything when it comes to elder law, aging matters, and things like that, because he's kind of been there, seen that, and been doing this for years. His name is Bill Johnson, board-certified elder law attorney with the law office, William A. Johnson, PA. Hey, Bill, how are you today?
I'm doing well. How are you?
I am excellent. And, you know, we titled, when we're trading emails earlier in the week, and we said, what are we going to title this show? And you came up with what I thought was actually a brilliant way to look at it. You said planning or failure to plan, because, you know, we all have choices about this thing. The question is, what are we going to choose? And so one of the things, I guess, Bill, if it's okay with you, I want to talk just for a minute about the aging plan itself, because I remember Joe from the very first day. He said, Kerry, we all have to have an aging plan. And he said, and I remember being a little bit fuzzy on it. I was like, okay, that sounds like I got to get out 3-ring binders, maybe my protractor, and start writing columns and all kinds of complicated things. And as I talked to him more about it, I kind of got a sense that it's more the same as we react when they talk to us about a hurricane plan. You don't want a hurricane, but you want to have a strategy of how you're going to react and what you're going to do, and making sure, as we call it now these days, euphemistically, getting your ducks in a row so that things that may come upon you won't necessarily have to disrupt everything, but you already have a plan for how you're going to go at it. And Bill, I know as a board-certified elder law attorney who's been practicing for so many years and has so much experiences, you see every day in your office the difference between somebody who has planning documents and has gotten that part of it right, and then those people that you really have to swing into action and try to make the best of a complicated situation, because they don't.
Well, we just had somebody in the office not too long ago here who husband needs nursing home care. We need to get him on Medicaid, and we need to move assets around. And, of course, he never did a durable power of attorney.
Wow.
So now the only way we can get authority to do that, and he's incompetent now, incapacitated, so he can't do a new one.
Wow.
Or even do one. And now we're looking at having to do a guardianship to get the authority to move the assets around. Now we got to go to court, and that's all about a $10,000 proposition.
You know, we have talked about that so often on the radio over the years. We've had this conversation. We always have these, please don'ts, right? We say, please don't pull that business card off the bulletin board. Maybe it's at church, or maybe it's at, at a local grocery store, and if somebody will help you get your documents together, and yet, so often that's not done well, or worse, sometimes we see those ads on TV. Oh, it's so simple. Just click this button, and you'll have your estate plan done in 10 minutes online. And the problem with all of those things is, since there's no expert guidance in either one of those, the problem is these poor people don't find out that they've got a problem until it's absolutely too late.
Another one of my assistants just brought me a document today. She goes, "Is this even a valid will?" And I looked through it, and technically it barely meets the criteria.
Yeah.
But because it doesn't have what we call a self-proof, a notarization, where the notary says she saw, or he or she saw everybody sign the documents.
Right.
You would have to go find all the witnesses to sign affidavits after the person died.
Wow.
So, I mean, just the little things, but yeah, when it's in a form that somebody got from, I don't know, some office supply place, probably somewhere.
Yeah, it's incredible, because when you think about it like that, so those are people, so there's actually probably 3 categories we could talk about today, Bill. Those people who have planned correctly. They've gone to a good elder law attorney, and maybe this is a point that's worth bringing up, because you and I have had this conversation on radio and TV before. A lot of times people might say, well, Fred is my law. I went to college with him. He's an expert in real estate or, some other form of law, and I'm just asked him to draw up my documents. And then it's kind of like going to, I don't know, a heart specialist when you need, I don't know, a brain specialist. It's like they're competent, but they're competent in their field. And so the general attorney doesn't really know the nuances like you or somebody that practices elder law exclusively would.
I heard on the radio the other day a guy who was an ophthalmologist, and he goes, when you go to medical school, you study all the human body, but when you get out there and practice, my practice is limited to the eyeball.
Right.
He goes, in the middle of the COVID, they were calling up all the doctors to go work at the hospital. And he goes, I was actually terrified, because right now, all I remember is the eyeball.
Yeah. Well, but that's the point. And we should be specialists, right? You get the right tool for the right job, and so when you're talking about things that we're talking about in an aging plan, your attorney that maybe helped you in a family divorce case or something like that, may be a wonderful person, but they're in their lane and they know those things. Whereas when you sit down and talk with somebody who's an elder law attorney, but especially a board certified elder law attorney who's taken all that extra time to go through all those processes and learn everything there is to know, it makes a difference. And to that point, that's why I said I really think there's planning, there's failure to plan, and maybe a third category is there's maybe you thought you planned, but you need to recheck what you planned, because there's a whole nother area, Bill, that we've talked about so often on the way. In Florida, I heard a statistic. I don't know if it's true or not. They say 80% of statistics are made up on the spot, but I actually did hear this. There was something like 1,000 people are moving into Florida. I can't remember if it was like every day but it was like a lot of people are now making Florida their home. And so they come from up north, out west, wherever they're coming from, and they're happy to come to the Sunshine State and get settled here. And maybe many of them had really good help, whatever state they came from, and maybe they tried to be responsible and do their documents, get all those things together. Then they come into Florida, but the Florida rules, we've spent hours talking about how the Florida rules actually are different, and you want to make sure your documents take advantage of everything that could help you here.
No, correct. If you change and move from a state to a state, you should always, when you're in the new state, have them reviewed by an attorney in that state.
Yeah. Yeah. So zooming back out just a notch, and we talk about this topic, planning or failure to plan. One of the things that, when Joe has always been on his drumbeat about, we got to do an aging plan. Everybody needs to do their own, because we know there's certain categories that seniors can often fall into, but doesn't mean every senior hits every pothole. But there are certainly some that make sense to plan for. And so we've kind of taken up Joe's challenge where he talks about making that aging plan, and we try to break it into 7 key areas. I mean, arguably, we could probably talk for days, and there should be more in all those. But just to keep it simple in people's minds, we talk about the legal aspects. Well, actually, we start with number 1. We talk about your health and wellness, because that is building block number 1. You've got to look at the things that are going to keep you alive and healthy to the best that you can be at all times. So that's block number 1. But the second block, which is kind of intertwined, as we've talked so many times, Bill, is the legal block, because the legal block doesn't just have to do with your last will and testament. It has to do with everything in between, like healthcare surrogates and living wills and all these kind of things.
So obviously you want to have your estate planning done and basically a will or a trust and your beneficiary designations on how your estate's going to pass when you pass. And then, but again, nowadays, not everything kills you. And a lot of us are living a very long time with various diseases that leave you incapacitated, but don't necessarily finish you off fast. And subsequently, you need to have some documents in place, like a durable power of attorney for finances, so somebody can manage your financial affairs. You have to have a healthcare surrogate, so somebody can make your healthcare decisions if you're unable to. And then you should have a living will, what your end of life wishes are. I mean, and this is a big misconception out there. I get this all the time, but people who are married just assume, oh, if something happens to my husband, I can just get into his 401k and pay his healthcare costs. No, you can't. Not unless you have some authority to do that. And you may be stuck doing a guardianship again, which is, again, an invasive procedure that runs about $10,000 just to get the authority to get in that 401k.
Yeah, I've really gotten the sense, as we've talked about this over the years, that the difference between planning ahead is, a few hundred, maybe a few $1,000s at the most. But then the other extreme of it is when you run into this problem, if you don't have these paperworks, now it's $10,000, $20,000, $30,000 because of all the challenges. And it's not only the money, right? It's the hassle, because now everything has to be going through a court, and you have to wait if the court approves, and all kinds of mess like that.
And it gets worse in the middle.
Yeah.
You mentioned that at the beginning. Is what do you have somebody who tried to plan, but they didn't do it correctly?
Right.
So now we have a document, let's say a will, where they said, I want, my house to go to my daughter who took care of me, and the remainder can be split between my 3 kids. And then they messed up the execution, because they didn't follow the instructions on LegalZoom. Yeah. And now we have a defective will, but we know what the grantor wanted to do, but because it's a defective will, that's not how it's going to happen.
Wow.
And then now you have everybody arguing, all up in arms, and everybody in the family's fighting.
Yeah, the finger pointing begins, and that's another point we've talked all along about. When you do your planning right, you're doing this for yourself, obviously, because that way you can be sure your wishes are at the front row. Whereas, like we've talked also before, if you don't have a plan for your life, the government does, and it may just not be what you had in mind.
Correct.
Yeah.
And you need if you have a plan, you need to review it.
Yeah.
Because, having a durable power of attorney from 1995 just isn't going to cut it. And if you haven't reviewed it, you back in 1995, you may have named your son as your power of attorney. Well, in between, he could be in federal penitentiary.
Right.
Things change, and you may not want to have him as your durable power of attorney in charge of your finances.
That's why this, this thing, when you talk about like a living will kind of thing, which has really more to do with health than anything else. But really, when we're talking about that, I would almost say that's why your aging plan has to be living. So we talked about 2 areas. We talked about health and wellness kind of being block number 1. The second block is legal. The third block, though, actually ties into a lot of what we're talking about, too. That's your financial plan. Bill, we spent so many times We're talking with Bill Johnson, board-certified elder law attorney with William A. Johnson. We've talked so many times on the radio about how you'll find these articles and they talk about people's list of things they're concerned about for retirement, and usually 1 and 2 is like where I'm going to play my next round of golf, and someplace like 18 or 19 is, I might need to think about long-term care or things like that. And yet this is what your office is seeing is what was number 18 suddenly becomes number 1.
Overnight.
Yeah.
And usually it doesn't give you a lot of warning. All of a sudden there's a stroke or something like that, or a fall, and next thing long-term care is right there front and center, whether you wanted it there or not.
Yeah, and so part of the thing that when I talk about the financial aspect, Bill, one of the things your office is really good about is helping people find the help that they may need financially at certain points in time. I mean, I know you give a lot of seminars where you'll talk about Medicaid planning. So, I think so many people, because we get the calls on the Senior Information Helpline, people will call us and say, oh, well, Medicare is just going to pay for my nursing home, won't it? They told me I only get 100 days and there's all these costs, and everybody is, many people are just shocked thinking that the government was going to just take care of all that. It doesn't work that way.
Well, Kerry, it's interesting you bring that up because I just posted to Facebook a article I did this morning that is off of CNBC. And the article is called "The Number One Mistake People in Their 50s Make with Their Money According to a Certified Financial Planner and How to Fix It." Number one mistake, or number one issue, secure long-term care insurance. Or if you can't afford it, then we got to look at how qualifying you for Medicaid. 2, try to increase your 401k contribution. Again, so you don't outlive your money and you can also afford your style of living. Diversify your tax buckets. So not everything's in a 401k. You have a Roth and different sources of money that can come out. But that was the top 3 he had, that financial planner.
And it's funny when we, not funny, but it's interesting when we talk through this because we did a show together with a lady named Lori Peary of the Peary Agency, who is Dave Ramsey trusted, I think is the correct term. But she's kind of built her business around trying to become like an expert of all things that are out there, long-term care insurance. And I was telling somebody back at the Helping Seniors office after that particular radio show, I kind of felt stupid sitting in the corner as you guys were talking during the break, because you guys were talking shop at this really high level about all these nuances and things. And yet we, as a typical consumer, I was telling her, I said, I didn't really, because Joe Steckler, our president and founder, has always talked about the importance of long-term care insurance, but then he's also bemoaned the fact that he doesn't think enough companies are still in the business. And Lori was given like this overview, like, no, there are different choices, but you have to know exactly how you're going to deploy it, what you're trying to accomplish with it, and you got to do it early.
And how much you can afford.
Right.
I mean, and she came up, that was a wonderful show because she had all kinds of ideas on how to plug somebody into getting some protection in that arena.
Yeah. I mean, so we always talk about this, when we have this thing about, get your ducks in a row. And one of the first corollaries that we added in was don't try this on your own because you go out there on the internet and yes, you're smart and you're a rocket engineer and you know how to send things into space or whatever your area, whatever your lane is, you're pretty smart and you know that lane. But when you get into these other lanes and you start Googling things, like I use this all the time. I talk to people about the danger of Googling around on legal questions because it seems to me, Bill, you always run into 2 problems. First of all, it doesn't deal with state law. It's going to show you some attorney's office in California telling you what you're supposed to do, which may be right for California, but it's almost assuredly not going to be working in Florida the way they would say. And then the second part of that same conversation is that when you go out online and they start quoting different cases that support this side of it or that side of it, then you'll find out that one was from 1974, has no applicability to 2024.
And again, it's how often somebody updates their website.
Yeah.
But you're behind the times, Kerry. It's all Chat GPT now.
Which is actually scarier, right?
It is. I mean, there are a lot of attorneys I know have tested it, including myself. And it's missed on some things.
Yeah, and like we said at the outset of the program, here's the problem with this. You can't afford to miss. Many times, what do they call it when you play golf and you say, can I get a mulligan? I want to, I mean, there's a lot of cases where you can get some grace, but, on some of this legal stuff, there's no going backwards.
A good example, there's an attorney who used Chat GPT to write his closing argument that had to be written, it cited all these cases. It turned out half the cases didn't exist.
Oh, was the judge smart enough to figure that one out?
The attorney had egg all over his face. Yes.
And I would think that probably doesn't reflect well on them. That's a shortcut. But again, that's why we talk about you've got to make an aging plan and you've got to get a hold of the right expert at the right time, like we were talking about. So, if you're talking about, I want to look at long-term care insurance and see what my options are, that would be a good call to like Lori Peary at the Peary Agency. But if we're talking about trying to make sure your paperwork is in order on that legal plane, that's why you got to call the law office of Bill Johnson. So before we take our mid-show break, we're talking with board-certified elder law attorney Bill Johnson. I want to make sure, because you do a lot of seminars and things at One Senior Place, and you're always good about being out in the community and sharing maybe things that people ought to be thinking about. If somebody wants to, and plus you do that great booklet, the that you publish in Boomer Guide, which is a great primer on all things you need to start thinking about as a senior. How people can get that on your website, but how do they get in touch with all the resources?
They can reach us at 321-253-1667 or at FloridaElderLaw.net.
Yeah, I think you've got that publication. You can actually download it right there from the website. And what a great resource that is, because not only is it an expert primer on just some areas you might want to be thinking about, but I like the way you wrote it because it's very very non-lawyerly. It's very like you can read it and you can actually understand what's being said.
And that's on purpose.
So it's a great start to get us to wade in the water and think about these things that we need to think about. So on the second half of the show, we're going to continue with our topic today, planning and failure to plan. So stay tuned with us for the second half of Helping Seniors Radio. We'll be right back. Look forward to it.
Always like hearing that music on Wednesday afternoons with Helping Seniors of Brevard. That means the second half of our show is ready to get underway. Let me reintroduce to you the Executive Director of Helping Seniors of Brevard and the host of our show every Wednesday, 12 noon to 1 o'clock, none other than Kerry Fink. And Kerry, you've got one of our favorite guests in the studio today.
Absolutely. It's a learning opportunity every time we get to sit down with board-certified elder law attorney Bill Johnson of the law firm William A. Johnson, P.A. Welcome back, Bill.
Oh, glad to be here.
Yeah, and we have been talking this whole time about a topic called planning and failure to plan. And so, first of all, I want to welcome you back. We gather around the radio every Wednesday, lunchtime, midday, 12 noon to 1 p.m. right here on 90.3 FM, WEJF. And if you're listening online at WEJF.net, thank you too. And again, one of the reasons we do the podcast is maybe you missed some of the conversation from the first half of the radio show because you're just able to tune in just now. And that's why we do that. We make these radio shows, the TV shows, everything we publish in Senior Scene magazine. We make all of that available on the Helping Seniors website, helpingseniorsofbrevard.org. You can find it on our Facebook page, Helping Seniors of Brevard, YouTube channel, same. And then every place you get a podcast, you're going to find the radio show, because we find two things. Somebody may have missed something at the beginning of the show. They want to go back and catch it. Oftentimes somebody gets something useful out of the radio programs and they want to share it with somebody. They say, oh, Fred should have been listening to this, and let me get a copy. Let me get the link over to Fred because he needs to get working on his aging plan, which is kind of what we're talking about. And during the first half of the show, we actually worked through, we have just kind of like subdivided this whole topic of an aging plan into kind of 7 chapters or 7 areas we want you to think about. The first is your health and wellness. The second is the legal side of things that you want to have doing, both while you're here and then while you're hereafter. And then the third part of this we started getting into was financial. The fourth area, Bill, probably doesn't have as much to do directly with what we're talking about today, although it might. We call the fourth is most people say, I want to live at home safely as long as I can. That's my wish. I like my home. I'm happy here. This is my happy place. I want to stay safe as I get older. And that often adds a lot of parameters of things that you want to think about, like keeping your home, particularly in Florida, Bill. We've talked about how homestead exemptions are very favorable to seniors who own their homes, maybe relative even to other states.
They are. In Florida, we are very protective of the homestead. And even with your homestead, if you're a senior, you can get breaks on your property taxes or push them off down the road. So having a house is very favorable. A lot of the problem I run into, everybody wants to stay home. Well, the first thing is, everybody says that, but not everybody has a plan to do that.
Right.
They just assume, I get sick, I need care. Medicare is going to pay for people to come to my house and take care of me. No.
Right.
They're not. You're on your own. And so you're going to pay for home health care and people that come to the house. And then a lot of the people who want to stay home don't want people in their house.
Yeah.
And so there's this constant struggle between the kids and the parents about getting the proper care. The parents are in denial about how bad their situation is and not listening to the kids. The kids are trying to help out, and the parents are basically, it's a generational thing, but parents don't like to listen to kids.
Right.
They assume that they should be telling the kids what to do, not the other way around. So then you don't get the support you need at home, and next thing you fall, and boom, you're in a nursing home.
Yeah, I mean, so that's why planning, and when we talk about the topics, the kind of the subcategories within that whole thing, we add so many like little subdivisions in there because we talk about your physical safety at home. Is your home safe for you to age in? Have you made modifications that will help you age in place safely? The big one you just talked about was getting the right help. Joe always calls it.
And by the way, if you need that, you need to call Aging Matters because they do assist people with getting the bars and the wheelchair ramps and things like that.
100%. And then, like we were talking about, the people coming, getting used to help in your home. Joe has always called it elements of care, and he's always been careful to say, like, you need to get the right level of help at the right time. So maybe you start out with, just companion care, something like Jennifer Barton with Seniors Helping Seniors, where they basically are assisting you with some of the things that you might need, trips to doctor's offices or things like that, or helping with around the home or making sure.
Yeah, cooking, cleaning.
Yeah, you get your shopping done, those kind of things. And then because you have the habit of having that person, and if it progresses, now you need help with showering or things like that, you can step up what you need, but you're getting what you need at the time you need it. And
you only have to pay for what you need, too.
Right. And, Bill, that's the thing. I guess, once again, people say, well, doesn't Medicare pay for that? And you already answered the question. It's like, no, it doesn't, And so that kind of leapfrogs us into really the next chapter of your aging plan, which is what we say is, well, what if it's not your plan to stay at home, or maybe it's not possible for you to stay at home? And Bill, you and I have done whole radio shows. We've talked about right ways to make plans going forward and wrong ways. Like we've talked about where, well, the kids are going to inherit the house, so I'm just going to deed it over to them, and it causes you all kinds of extra work because now the Medicaid or the VA planning or whatever is going on is really messed up.
Correct. So if you start getting into that situation, you really need to go talk to somebody who does that kind of planning, because you can make a lot of wrong. I have people who come in who, oh, we just moved all the money in the house into the kids' names. Now I need Medicaid. And I'm like, you're not getting Medicaid.
Doesn't work that way.
Yeah, you're not getting Medicaid for 5 years. You're on your own to pay for this.
Yeah, we've talked about the fact that there's now all these, like they call them look back periods, right? So not only do you have to do whatever transfers and things like that. Oh, I just put my kid on the bank account so they can write checks if I'm in the hospital or something like that, and that's fraught with all kinds of danger.
Correct. More so in the VA world. Well, the VA world, not so much. Well, I guess in the VA world, yeah, it's a little more fraught than the Medicaid world.
Uh-huh.
The Medicaid world just assumes it's still your money.
Okay.
They don't care if your kid's name's on the account.
Yeah.
But if you add a kid to a house, a car, or something, Medicaid will dock you for having made a gift.
Yeah, but then the flip side of it too is like it's kind of like you get into this pretty deep when you talk to people about powers of attorney, which is giving someone some control over decisions to be made regarding your finances or things like that. And one of the dangerous things is if you just put a kid on a bank account and there's some other problem that the kid runs into, that money could be gone and you don't have really any where to go with that.
And just a word to the wise, generally we don't have to worry so much about your kids. A lot of times it's who they're married to.
Yeah, this brings a whole lot my mother-in-law, father-in-law kind of stuff to the table. But I know that you have had a practice where you have learned a lot about family dynamics.
Oh, yes. More than I ever wanted to know.
Yeah, and I think
I've seen family treat family like the most horrific you would ever think. I mean, it's just amazing what occurs out there.
Yeah, I was thinking, like you had told me, I don't remember, it was something like a thing that you had on your desk or something, but there was some statement like where there's what was it, where there's a will or something?
No, money isn't everything, but it keeps the kids close.
Something like that.
Yeah.
So that's a point too. So like when we're talking about what's your living option, do I want to live at home as safely as I can? But you still need to have a plan because it may not be optional. You may have to have, people run into memory care. There's all kinds of situations that could happen where staying at home really just isn't practical anymore. So you need to have investigated a lot, kind of down that side of it as well. And so...
Yeah, I mean, just think about it. If you've fallen, had a hip fracture, and you can't really walk, and, you're going to stay at home?
Yeah.
What? Well, you're going to just stay in bed? Well, how are you going to eat? Make it to your medical appointments, any of that.
Yeah. So, I mean, that's why I said this when we talk about what Joe Steckler, our president and founder, is always talking about. You got to have a plan and you got to think through some of these questions. Like, because now we have the luxury of hypotheticals. Well, we could do this or we could do this. Here's an option. This one costs more than that one. And you get to make a choice. And, Bill, I'm sure in your office, you get to meet families at points where first of all, maybe there isn't a choice or it's a choice between two very bad, difficult, expensive ones.
Correct. And, if you're looking for services at home or in an assisted living through Medicaid, there's a wait list.
Yeah.
50,000 people deep.
Yeah.
So, even if you're a worst case situation, you're still looking about 6 months before you can get any care.
Yeah. So we're talking about planning and what happens with failure to plan. And I hope as we're going through the conversation, you're seeing some of the advantages of planning and you're also hearing some of the dangers of not planning. But let me recap. We've talked about these 7 elements, or we're working our way through the 7 elements of an aging plan. So we talked about first is health and wellness. Second is your legal documents. The third is your financial plan. The fourth is I want to live at home, but I want to do it safely. The fifth is I want to look at other options in case I can't live at home, or maybe I'm just willing to downsize. The kids are gone. I don't need this big place. It's too expensive. Let's do something different. So that's an option. The 6th area, Bill, that we talk about, we call it organization and transportation. We kind of lump them together because I would say this. If somebody comes to your office, they sit down, they're very studious about working together with you and your team to get the right documents for them. but then something happens to them where they can't speak for themselves and nobody knows where those documents are, it becomes very complicated. So when we talk about organization, Bill, what we're talking about is somebody trying to make sure that paperwork is where the right people need to get it when they need to get at it.
Correct. Yeah, you should have a central location, not only including your legal documents, but where all your financial accounts are. You know, we have people who pass away and nobody has a clue where their assets are.
Yeah, I never even thought about that, because you always hear about, somebody passes away and then over time they discover there's like 24 bank accounts all over the country.
Yeah, so basically we just sit by the mailbox and wait for statements. Nowadays, a lot of people don't even get statements.
Right. So this is another reason why you've got to have your organization. And the transportation side of this, we just bring it into because most of us like to drive around ourselves if we can. But what if we can't? What if we need help getting to a doctor's office or getting to an appointment? And that's why we kind of lump these together, because I know, like in the days when we would have to take our moms to like emergency appointments, not appointments, I guess that you wouldn't have an appointment if it's an emergency, but if you're headed to the hospital and it's an emergency, and then the doctors, they right away, who's your doctor, what's your prescriptions, they want to know all these things, and they need to know that to keep you safe in the hospital, because they don't want to give you something that's going to fight something that's already in your system, I guess.
And especially you're going to rely on your kid. Well, your kid, lives in New Hampshire, and you're expecting them to fly down and all of a sudden pick up your life and know where everything's located, how to get to your doctors, what meds you're on, all that stuff.
Yeah, and it's very tough if you're not actively, you don't have all that organized, then your care could suffer because people don't know how to give you the best care.
And then it gets more complicated if you don't have kids.
Yeah.
And you don't have any relatives.
Well,
and if you also gets complicated if you're in a second marriage. And then who's going to take care? Maybe your spouse has kids that are local, and your kids are all out of state. Are we going to rely on the local ones, or do you want to rely on your own blood relatives?
Yeah, and I guess probably everybody knows that when there's a crisis, there's never a difference of opinion. Everybody says this is exactly what we do, right?
Oh, yeah.
So I guess that's another part of it. Well, the seventh point or plank in the aging plan we talk about is it really kind of ties back. It makes it kind of like a circle because you wind back at health and wellness. But the seventh plank that we talk about, Bill, is we talk about Medicare, because we have spent a lot of time since the medical component of your expenses as we get older tends to be a very large item just in our budget, whatever it turns out to be, whether it's because of prescriptions, whether it's because we need specialists, whether it's because whatever, we have to really make good quality decisions about the Medicare coverage that's going to be right for us. And I also add into that, Bill, the coverage of, like, a lot of times where people may not have the resources and they got to look at Medicaid anyway.
Well, one thing we need to talk about is Advantage plans right there.
Yeah.
Because, it may be a lot cheaper, but you are locking yourself in to a PPO network typically, where your choice of where you're going to go get care is not going to be up to you.
Yeah.
So, it may be cheaper, as I said, but if you want to go, say you have cancer and want to go to Moffitt or something, you may not be able to.
That's a point. Joe Steckler had always talked about, that he's always been a fan of traditional Medicare, maybe with a supplement, because, here in Florida, we have a lot of snowbirds. I'm going to be part of the year, I'm going to be here, and part of the year I'm going to be up north or in the Midwest or whatever. And because of that, getting to the doctors you need and stuff like that, might be strictly limited depending if you just took a Medicare Advantage plan.
Correct.
Yeah. And then the other thing that I've heard, and we talk about this a lot, so this is actually the second corollary. So remember, our whole thing at Helping Seniors and this whole conversation that we've been having about your aging plan, and as we call it, planning or failure to plan, corollary number one has been, don't try this on your own. When you sit down with an expert like, I call him an expert, Bill Johnson, board certified elder law attorney, and you're able to go through, here's my specifics, what is my best approach on all this. You're getting the benefit, like we talked about this. People run on this once or twice in their lifetime. You're dealing with this, all the time, and you have for years. So your wisdom and expertise is going to be applicable to everybody. But that is not only true in legal, Bill. I talk about it in the Medicare world too, because we see our favorite actor on TV and they tell us, just give us your zip code. We're going to give you a great plan. Call 1-800. And you love the person on TV, so you call them. And then they're sitting in a call center. First of all, you don't get to talk to the actor that you like. You're talking to somebody on the call center, and they're trying to help you, but they're sitting nowhere near you, and they don't understand Florida. They don't understand beachside, landside. They don't understand North Brevard, South Brevard, and they're trying to help you navigate to a plan, whereas you could talk to somebody who's your neighbor, 100% expert, local, who knows the plans, who knows what's covered, who knows which plans are likely to be most helpful. They can look at which drugs you're taking, what your doctors are, and make sure that whatever they craft is going to meet your situation. And that's that's why our second corollary is so we say get the help you need. Number one is the corollary is really don't try this on your own. But the second part is don't be an ostrich. Don't put your head in the sand. Go ahead and take action on all this stuff while you have options, Bill.
And while you can.
Yeah, exactly. It's so important. So we've been talking with board-certified elder law attorney Bill Johnson of the Law Office of William A. Johnson. We're gonna talk about failure and failure to plan. We're gonna keep the conversation going, but we're gonna shift it to the Helping Seniors car raffle, because you have two options. You could plan, which means get your tickets and maybe win a car, or you could fail to plan and you're not going to win a car. It could be that it really comes down to that. But before I get there, Bill, I want to make sure, because you do a series of excellent seminars and things, One Senior Place, and have a lot of information that's good on the serious side of this. How do people get in touch with you and learn about all that?
They can reach us at the office at 321-253-1667 or at www.floridaelderlaw.net.
Yeah, thanks, Bill Johnson. And I think on your website there's information about when you have the seminars and things available too, right?
Yes, there is.
So,
and One Senior Place has a schedule of all the seminars.
Yeah, and what a great resource that is, because you can go in, continue this conversation for free, and then learn enough so that when you spend time with Bill and his associates, you know the right questions to ask and have a good understanding of where you're going. So with that, we're going to turn our conversation about planning or failure to plan about your plan to get Helping Seniors car raffle tickets. So this is our big fundraiser for the Helping Seniors organization, and it is coming up quicker than you might think. October 27th sounds like it's a long way off, but it's really not. And it is the Sunday afternoon. We're going to take over once again. Thank you, Mark Pylock, and the wonderful team out there, Andrew Mackey, Ed Diedick with the American Muscle Car Museum. We're going to be out there, and this year we're going to do it a little bit different because there was so many people who were out there last year. We're going to do it in the Sunday afternoon, 1 p.m. to 4 p.m., and we thought, what does that do? That lets us have it daylight on both sides. So it's going to be easier for people to get there, get their parking, get organized, and also easier for them to get out at the end of the event at 5 p.m. So we'll have daylight on all sides. We're also going to make it very, very family friendly. So we're encouraging you to find your favorite kids, grandkids, if they're under, I think the official age is 10 or 12, I'm not sure. It's on the HelpingSeniorsCarRaffle.com website. But two kids can come in with an adult. So call the family. Let's get them all together. Come out to the museum. But the third thing is, because it's daylight hours on October 27th, Sunday afternoon, 1 p.m. to 4 p.m., we're also going to have it where you're going to have stuff inside the museum, but also outside the museum, because it's going to be daylight. So that's going to enable us to have really much more space for everybody who tends to show up for this. But of course, the big highlight is somebody is going to go home with keys to a brand new car on Sunday, October 27th. And that's why we say you are either planning or you could be failing to plan if you don't get your tickets, because you have to be in it to win it. So when you get a Helping Seniors of Brevard car raffle ticket, it does several things. You can get your first of all, it's a donation to Helping Seniors. This is literally half of our budget, and if you don't help us, we can't do the work that we set ourselves forth to do. We have no reason to exist other than to help seniors in Brevard County. So when you get your ticket, you're helping us do that. The second thing that happens is that you could win a brand new car. And that's why we call it the Choose Your Adventure car raffle, because you get to choose one of 7 cars this year. Bill, you know, when we've talked about this, it's always been a handful of cars that people could select from AJ Hire's family of dealerships. This year, we've gone like, it's like a catalog. It's like, remember when you used to get the Sears Wish Book and you would start looking through that? It's almost got that many choices now, because you could choose a Chevrolet Colorado pickup truck. You could choose a Jeep Compass Sport. You could take a Kia Sportage. You could take a Mitsubishi Outlander like Diane Pelak, our winner last year, did. There is a sporty little Dodge Hornet in there. There is a Mazda 3 if you're more the sedan type. So, and of course, the Mazda Miata convertible returns. So you've got 7 great choices in the Helping Seniors car raffle. Somebody's going to go home with car keys on Sunday, October 27th. You don't have to be present to win. Great if you can be, because it's all included. But that would be what happens if we pull your ticket on October 27th. You're going to decide which car you want. And then on top of it, your ticket is including all the fun that we're going to be having out inside and outside at the American Muscle Car Museum. They are asking that you have 2 tickets per entry into the back part of the museum this year. That is a policy from the museum. But 1 ticket gets you into all the fun, the refreshments, inside, outside, and then you can certainly take advantage of Mark's collection, which is now, they're telling me, getting close to 500 cars. But you got to be in it to win it. You can get tickets. Bill Johnson, you have tickets at your office.
We do.
So if you call Bill's office, they will get you set up with car raffle tickets. You can also pop by, we call it Jones Senior Resource Center, right there, 1344 South Apollo Drive, 2nd floor, and we've got your tickets there. You can go by any of the Boniface Hires car dealerships, and they're all over the county. You can pick your tickets up there. You can call us at 321-473-7770 and get your tickets safely and securely, charge them by phone. You can also go to helpingseniorscarraffle.com. We'll get you your tickets there. And there's even ways for you to, if you just want to do it the old-fashioned way and send in a check, if you'll call us at 321-473-7770, they'll give you that information. Well, Bill Johnson, thank you for sharing your expertise as always and being here with us and being a ticket pickup point for the Helping Seniors Car Raffle. Good things ahead, and that's the time we have for today's Helping Seniors radio show. We'll see you on the next week.